Unicorns and glitter and taxidermy critters are just some of the things they like. They also enjoy 80s hair bands, Grizzly Adams and John Goodman, so if you think that's weird then you can take a hike. But the things they enjoy the most are making art and cracking jokes, so without further ado, here are your hosts. You've got your two artsy gals, Here are your two artsy gals.
Hey, and welcome to the 5th episode of Two Artsy Gals. Woohoo!
Yay!
Yay! I'm Katie, and this is my awesome co-host Sharon, and
Hey, I'm Sharon.
And we're going to talk about not being a total tool today. Kinda. No, we're actually going to talk about what kind of tools you need to have in your studio or around your house to just be prepared to do any little job. From the time I was probably 18 and moved out until my brother made me get a toolkit when I was in my mid-20s, I used butter knives for screwdrivers and I don't know.
I've used nickels.
Oh, hey, nickels. That's nice. I've opened up my computer with a fucking butter knife before to fix it. So.
Butter knives are very handy.
They are. I'm not going to lie. I still use a butter knife or two once in a while. But, I don't know. I've used high heel shoes for a hammer. Or I went out and got a rock once and used it for a hammer.
Yes, I've been known to use a lot of things for a hammer.
I've smashed the shit out of my fingers doing stuff like that, too. So...
Yeah, using the proper tool for sure
definitely
will prevent accidents or cuts.
And just messing up whatever you're trying to work on if it's an art project. I have screwed some shit up using not good tools.
Sure.
So, but I'm going to talk a little bit about just basic tools that you should probably have around, and then I think Sharon, you're going to get a little bit more into jewelry making specific tools because that's kind of what you have in stock. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
I usually like to make you go first because I'm such a chatty bug. But I think we'll run through mine first, though, and then get into your more specific tools.
Sounds good.
Later. Seriously, buy a fucking hammer, people. It's not that expensive. You can go to and I have to confess, I'm very lucky because my husband's barbershop is right next door to a Harbor Freight Tools. Literally, he could spit on the door to the Harbor Freight Tools from his barbershop door.
Oh, you are so lucky.
And... they're all his clients. They all get their hair cut there. So he gets the family discount rate.
Oh,
so
that's
I
awesome.
get any tool I want. I'll just have to call him and say, hey, I need this special tool for this thingy-jigger here. And he'll bring home 3 so I can choose which one I want.
That is awesome.
But yeah, buy a hammer. And stuff like tape measure. And I would also keep a cloth one around. And a ruler, and there'll be a picture of my little tools on the blog. I think we're both going to post pictures of our tools, but I have a set of tiny screwdrivers and a couple of bigger ones, and I have wire cutter because I actually cut myself really bad trying to use utility scissors to cut 12 gauge wire once.
Oh.
And when it snapped through, the tip of the scissors cut the web between my thumb and my finger. I had to super glue that bitch up. It bled so bad. It was gross.
Hey, there's a thing that super glue's good for.
Hey, that's right. That is the only other thing I can think that it's good for. Because it works so well on skin.
Right.
So, as we've already covered last week.
Right. No kidding. Hey, Katie, do you want to talk about why you'd want to have a fabric measuring tape opposed to just a ruler or one of the rigid ones?
Well, I think they all do different jobs, and a fabric measuring tape is easier if you're trying to measure the circumference of something, or measure something that's oddly shaped, or it can just wrap around or kind of go over the bumps, and that is just much easier that way. So sometimes I use that. I pin my cloth tape measure to specialty papers. So I can transfer marks onto them. And I know because it's pinned there, it's not going to move. It's not going to get, because like I said, I have some paper that I would cry and throw up if I screwed up because I've spent a lot of money on it. So, but and you might want to use I have a nice big steel ruler. You use it as a straight edge. You use it to measure things, and like the tape measure on your, it's just easier when you're measuring something on the wall or.
Sure.
They all do a different job, and I figure if you have one of each around, if one doesn't work, the other one will.
Right. There you go. Yeah, that's a good tool. A nice metal ruler.
I have two. I have one long one, and I have one shorter one. So, and I love them.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Speaking from an art standpoint, too, you're going to be hanging a lot of art on the, you're going to want to see how it hangs on the wall. And I don't know about you, but I store mine. I just hang mine on the wall until I sell it.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because I don't want to lose track of it. So I hang it on the wall. And, you also want like a level, just a bubble level, like something that you can, when you're hanging your work. And I actually use that also when I'm marking lines. I use the level to double check and make sure that everything's straight. So that's where like your hammer and your tape measure and the level and all that are going to fall in. Like even when you're putting hangers on the back of your work to be hung, you want to have the right tools to do that with. You don't want to ruin your piece of artwork by trying to hammer a nail in with a rock, or if you don't have a level and you're not doing it, you don't want to sell a piece of artwork. I actually made a piece for a friend once, and she called me and she goes, "Were you drunk when you put the hook on the back of that?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "It is hanging so crooked on my wall right now that I don't know how you did that." So,
oh wow.
In fairness, I may have actually been drunk when I did that, but
as a matter of fact, yes, I was.
Also, another thing that I really think is pretty important to keep in your studio, especially if, like me, you work with any kind of silicone. Like I use 2-part silicones to make molds, and I use epoxy resins that I have to measure, and I have a set of measuring cups, steel measuring cups and measuring spoons that are solely for use in my studio.
Yeah, that's a really good point, too, is making sure that you have the separate tools like that for your studio and you don't just use them in your kitchen, because if you are using toxic materials or things like even like in soap making, maybe you're only putting olive oil in it, but you don't want to get that mixed up.
Yeah, no. That's how I ended up with the stainless steel set of measuring cups for my office, because I wasn't thinking about it, and I used them to measure this like liquid silicones, and I used that and it didn't come out of the measuring cups very well. And then I looked at it and thought, you know what? I probably shouldn't have been using the ones that I use in the kitchen anyway.
Yeah.
So I went and bought a new pair. But I always have anything like that. I even have like little mixing bowls and stuff that I bought. Actually, a restaurant went out of business next to my husband's barber shop, and we went and bought a whole bunch of little ramekins.
Oh, nice.
And I use those for mixing paint in and all that. I just have a bunch of stuff that I keep that's solely for this room and for my studio. So,
yeah, I think it's important to have that kit, that even your hammer is the one that stays with your art kit, and not that you don't have to look for it everywhere.
Yeah, actually, I have issues with
tools.
My husband and my son both coming in to look through stuff that I have and taking crap and not bringing it back. So I write my name on my stuff now, because that was one thing with my hammer. My son kept borrowing my hammer, and I'm like, dude, go buy your own hammer. Like, you're 18 years old. You can go into a hardware store and buy a hammer. Give mine back.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Well, that would happen to me with my jewelry hammer, and that's a delicate hammer.
Yeah, that's a cute little tiny one.
That can't be used, on a big old nail on the wall.
Yeah. That's crazy. I know my husband and I fight about, I have a Dremel tool that my uncle got me for my birthday when I was like 25 or something like that. And he tries to steal my Dremel all the time.
Oh.
And I'm like, look, this is not going to work. You can use it, but you bring it back to me. The same rule that you have for me using your tools goes for you using mine. So he does the same thing he finally bought his own drill. Because I would get mad that he was using my drill all the time and not bringing it back. And so I know I mentioned power tools, and I was going to talk a little bit about them, but I don't feel like they're a staple. I don't think they're something that you have to have. So, but they're nice to have. I mean, like, I do have a Dremel tool that I use a lot, and I do have just a, you know, a low power drill. It's not anything big and fancy, but it does what I need it to do.
Right.
So I'm looking at the picture here of what I have out, and I think I have a couple of clamps that I use. Like when you're gluing stuff, it's nice to have a couple of clamps to hold them down. I also have a couple of little barbells that I do not use for working out, but work awesome for holding stuff down when you're gluing it. So
yeah, right.
I think I also have pictured as I have a little cup of, they're like my clay working tools. I don't know what they're called. They're the little silicone tipped guys that are on a wooden handle.
Oh, it's almost like a potter's blending tool.
Yeah, they're blending tools. That's what they are. And they're just different shapes that I use. But also in that jar, they're all clay working tools, different kind of scrapers and pokers and awls. And I have a few little grinders that are like little handheld file kind of things, but they're very precisely shaped. I don't necessarily think that those are a staple to have, but little things like that, like you want something that you can sand with. Grinders. Like I also keep like sandpaper blocks and that kind of stuff around, but definitely like just little point. I have a set of dental tools actually that my husband got online, and they didn't work for what he wanted, but they're like little scrapers, and although they kind of freak me out a little bit because I hate the dentist, but I almost need a Valium to use them.
And then that'll be good. Yeah.
That's an excuse to take
great.
a Valium. But
Yeah.
And I think I also took a picture of a blow dryer. I have like my old hair dryer that I don't use on my hair anymore that works great for drying glue or drying paint or anything like that. And I also a heat gun, because it works awesome for like embossing powders and all that, and also for drying stuff and all that. And I have a little tiny hand iron that I use a lot.
Do you use yours a lot?
I do, because I do fabric origami too.
Oh.
And I'll get into that in our origami episode, but that helps a lot. It's to just iron the fold and make it super nice and crisp.
Yeah.
It works great. And I iron paper a lot like that. Like if I tea dyeing or coffee staining papers and then they dry and they're kind of wrinkly and I don't want them wrinkly, I just iron them with that little tiny hand iron. So
I have a little tiny iron. I'm going to have to pull that out. That's awesome.
Yeah, I use it for that kind of stuff a lot. And I also, when I'm like, sometimes I don't want to, if I'm doing an art piece that involves like, I'm trying to think of an example that we did a self-portrait a while back for a project that was like for a swap, and I made like a little jointed skeleton doll that was supposedly me, and I made a little cloth dress to put on it.
Oh, cute.
But instead of sewing that little teeny tiny thing, I just used stitch witchery and fold the edges up. So I just use that little tiny iron because it's just so small. Like I don't want to get out my great big giant iron and and it's kind of my crafting iron too. I don't really care what it gets on it. It doesn't.
Right.
I'm not going to sew like iron fabric. I'm sewing with it, so it doesn't matter if I get goop from the stitch witchery or anything like that on it. But those are my basic staples, and those I feel like after years of amassing tools, and if you saw the tool collection I had, like you would be totally aghast at my hoarding issues. And I have different tools for different things too. Like I do a lot of wiring. I wire lights into my work, so I have a whole electronics bag. That's a completely separate thing. So, and maybe someday if there's interest, I'll do an episode about wiring LEDs into your work and stuff.
I think you should. I think that'd be awesome.
I'll put that on my list of ideas. But I feel like over 20 years of doing art in my own space, those are the things, like those, you want a good pair of pliers, again, wire cutters, just have the right tool for the job.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and you can hurt yourself, you can break the tool. I've broken lots of tools using them for things they're not supposed to be used for.
Me too. Or just not, and thinking it was the right tool. Yeah, I've ruined things before. Sadly. But, that's how we learn.
Yeah, you live and you learn, they say.
That's right.
Well, what do you, I actually can't see your tools. that you're going to talk about, but tell me about them.
I will. So I'm going to talk about tools that I use with making jewelry. And when I first started making jewelry, I basically had a pair of wire cutters and some round nose pliers.
Which is kind of just what I have.
Right.
That's
but
it.
There's so many other tools out there when you're doing wire work and making and shaping jewelry. And I cut and shape a lot of metal. And so one thing that is really nice and I love are a pair of metal shears. You can get some really nice smaller metal shears on vintage.com, vintaj.com. They're awesome. They have lots of tools there. And I can cut through my little metal blanks really easily and make some different shapes.
That's
with those
awesome.
Metal shears.
I actually just cut down a bunch of copper today that my son's dad gave me for a project.
Mm-hmm.
And I use these gigantic tin snips. And they're like, I have girl hands. And those are hard to squeeze.
Those are hard. Yeah, these metal shears are smaller. They're like a very small pair of scissors. So they're small and they're great for working with small stuff and small jewelry. So yeah, those tin snips they're too big for the job.
They are. And what are they? They're called metal shears?
They're called metal shears.
I'm going to order a pair of those because
and they're quite reasonable. All these tools are actually quite reasonable on that website. The other thing that I use, I'll punch holes in my metal a lot to do holes for putting in ear wires or attaching little jump rings that I need to put jump rings through, or if it's a necklace, it needs to have a jump ring on it. So I have short jaw, they're called a short jaw hole punch plier, and they're just a hole punch to punch in through metal. And the ones that I have is just one size. You can get other hole punches. My husband has another one that I stole it for a little too long, so I had to give it back, and now I don't know where it is. I think he's hidden it from me. I think he's hidden it. But you can get ones that come with different size holes. So you can make big holes, smaller holes just to put the jump rings through, bigger holes to make, maybe you want a hole in a big flat piece of metal just for some interest.
Actually, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that tool today because I'm getting ready to work on a project where I'm going to be using that copper. And I was just thinking today, God, do I use my awl and a hammer? I don't want to use the awl that I use for bookbinding or my hole punch that I use for bookbinding.
No,
I feel like that would dull it and it wouldn't do it. So I was wondering what I was going to do to put holes in it. But so it's
go to Harbor Freight. You can look for the hole punchers there, or you can go online and look for the short jaw hole punch plier. It'll just do a small hole. It's like probably a couple millimeters.
That's all I need. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they aren't very expensive, and you can get new little blades for it. So if it dulls, then they have replacement parts for them.
Okay.
They're really cheap.
I'm going to have a list of stuff to send my husband to Harbor Freight tools to look for.
Oh yeah, and then of course a hammer for jewelry, hammering, making. You want to hammer something flat. You want to hammer something round.
So, are you talking like a regular size hammer or
No, like a jewelry hammer. They're just a little bit smaller.
Okay.
Yeah, and then with that, I would do a bench block. So I just have a piece of, it's a metal. It's called a bench block. They come in different sizes. You can get sort of rubbery ones, but I have a metal one. And it's probably 3 or 4 inches square and then by like an inch tall, and I can just hammer things on that, give some texture, flatten things out. Okay, so then shaping pliers. So the shaping pliers there's round nose pliers, which I use, and those are usually tapered, which are nice because you can just do wire wrapping with them, and you can get different sizes of wire around that. But with the shaping pliers, they're the same diameter all the way around, if that makes sense, rather than the nose being tapered.
Okay.
So they're almost like a bigger tube, so you can wrap like flat metal around them and make a bead or a bail because they're the same width all the way around.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I love them because I'll I'll take a flat piece of metal and emboss it so it'll have, texture in it, and then I can take that piece of metal and wrap it around it and then create like a cylindrical tube and create like a bead.
That's cool.
Yeah, I love them.
Now, what are the ones that are tapered?
Those are round nose pliers.
Round nose. And what are those for? I'm sorry, I'm probably getting at you.
Those would be more for wire wrapping, just using them to open or close jump rings, which I actually use more of my chain nose pliers, which they're flat when you close them together. They're flat, so it's like a half rounded. So it's round on the outside, flat when they come together.
Okay.
So those are called chain nose pliers, and those are good for opening and closing jump rings, holding things, because they're flat. So they won't, like with the round nose, sometimes, something, it won't hold something very well.
Yes. I could show you a gnarly picture of a blood blister that I got from trying to use my round nose pliers to squeeze a jump ring closed.
Mm-hmm.
And it all slipped and things went sideways, and I pinched the shit out of my finger. Like, I pinched myself. I think I did put it on Pinterest, Instagram. I pinched so hard that I made a blood blister and broke it all in one motion. It hurt so bad.
Oh, that's terrible. You should get some chain nose pliers.
I think I have them. I'm going to lean over really quick, and I know this is shitty to do to people listening to an audio podcast, but we'll put pictures up, because I buy tools that I don't know what I think they're for something and they're not, but I want to know if that's what these are. So, but I don't. Hey, I reached over there and an avalanche didn't happen. That was awesome.
That's good.
So, I think these are the round nose pliers.
Yes.
Okay.
See how they're tapered. Mm-hmm.
Those are the
round nose pliers.
pinchy bastards is what I call those.
Uh-huh.
That's the name of that tool at my house. And then I have, these I think are specifically meant for D-rings. Opening and closing D-rings.
Okay, but it's not flat coming
together.
No, it's not.
Okay, it's not.
Okay.
But that's what I was thinking of. And then I have these crazy flat guys. And they've got a little plastic on them that...
Those are kind of like a chain nose, but chain nose come to a point, more of a point.
Okay.
Throw all that shit away.
No.
Don't do that.
I'm sorry, I'm making all kinds of noise with that box. Jesus. Sharon's telling us about jewelry tools today, but she's actually, I think, is it the next episode or the episode after you're doing a jewelry making episode? So that's going to be, I'm super excited about it.
Oh, good.
So anyway, continue.
And then the last two things would be flush cutter, which would be your wire cutters.
Mm-hmm.
And when you cut, one way that you cut them, the wire would be flat. The other way you cut it would be sort of tapered. So
with
just
one
a good
cutter?
pair of flush cutters, they're wire cutters, but they're like a jeweler's.
So are they specific for jewelry making? Like a flush cutter is a specific kind of wire cutter for jewelry making?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the last thing is our files. Just a good set of files that you can get. You can get them at a bead store. And they come in different sizes. You could have like a little round one, a flat one.
So it's probably kind of like what I was talking about that I keep around in my little jar.
Yeah, just some nice little files. You can get a nice little file set with like 10 different files for like between $10 and $15. They're great. I actually poke through things with my files. That's not what they're really supposed to be used for, but I do. I file a lot of stuff with my jewel.
So would like those files be like? Would you, when you punch a hole in metal, would you file that so it wouldn't have a sharp edge or?
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I use the hole punch, it doesn't make too much of a burr on the back, but sometimes there's a little metal burr, so I will just lightly file it with one of those files.
Nice.
Or if I need the hole just slightly bigger, I'll stick one of my round files through that little tiny hole and just make it a little bit bigger. Maybe my jump ring doesn't fit, but I don't have the, making another hole bigger, I just need a little tiny bit. So
gotcha.
Just filing it, sometimes you can even use it for texture. Sometimes one thing I will use the flat file for is if I cut with the metal shears and there's a sharp edge, I want to smooth down that edge so it's rounded, and then also so there aren't any burrs on it. sometimes I'll hammer those edges down too. But we can probably talk more about that in the jewelry episode.
Yeah.
Those are
really
some
cool.
of my favorite tools. I know there's a lot more that I use, but those would be
like your standards.
Standards that I use for jewelry.
Nice.
Yeah. And even that little hole punch I'll use in my mixed media things too. Maybe I'm adding a piece of metal, or I just need a little tiny, hole. I have lots of different hole punches, actually. I like to punch holes in things.
I just bought my first hole punch, and actually, that might be something that you would
just bought your
probably
first
have.
punch?
Well, like an official, not like a handheld hole punch, but like where you have the little thing and you hammer it.
Oh.
So, because it works, because I had been using, when I do my altered books and journals, I'd been using an awl to poke the hole, but it kind of leaves that little tent on the other side, it screws it up, and then when you're gluing over that and painting over it, sometimes the moisture soaks into the bookboard and makes it swell. When you do it that way. So I finally had to go buy, I bought one that it's a little hole punch. Yeah. It's like a little piece of metal with the hole. I think the one I got, you can screw 3 different size holes onto the end of the thing, and then you just whack it with a hammer. Although I fucked up my dining room table doing that, because I thought I had stuff underneath it, but I went through it too, because I don't know my own strength sometimes. And I looked the other day, I was dusting, and I'm like, what is on my, oh my god! I knew exactly what it was when I saw them, their little teeny rings.
Oh no.
In my dining room table, so.
Oops.
And I was like, I had a magazine, I think, underneath what I was doing. I figured a magazine would be okay, but.
Oh, wow.
I guess it was not okay. So.
Whoops.
Yeah, whoops is right. Thank God it was it's not like a family heirloom table or anything. It was kind
Maybe put a cutting board underneath it next time.
Yeah. That's actually another thing that I do keep, that you mentioned, cutting boards. I keep some in my studio too. I have a couple of little cutting boards that I've gotten at the dollar store.
Mm-hmm.
But they're good for when you're doing stuff, I do a lot of I have this weird soldering iron combination thing that my husband got me at Harbor Freight Tools, because that's where you get weird shit. But it has hot knife attachment and all these different things, and it has a little attachment where you can, how you burn wood. And you can make a picture from burning wood with the little thing. It's got all these little different attachments to it, and I have this little cutting board that I put down, because my desks that I have in here are, they're cheap IKEA desks. Once you break the little veneer surface on them, it's all over. So
they're all done.
Yeah, so they're kind of screwed up anyway, but I do keep a cutting board around to kind of try to protect the surfaces that I'm working on, because, I can't afford to go to IKEA every 6 months and buy a new goddamn desk. And who would want to go in there every 6 months anyway? It's a nightmare.
You gotta follow those arrows, and if you just, see...
I do not follow the arrows. I do not follow anyone's arrow. I am a rebel, and I go where the hell I want. I just can't handle the crowd.
No, I know.
Then every time we go there, my husband insists on eating those god-awful meatball things.
I have to say, I really like the meatballs.
Dude, I'm sorry, fucking podcast world, but I get the diarrheas every time I eat those. So I don't eat them anymore.
Yeah, but it's worth it.
I don't think it is. I really don't. I don't like the diarrheas. So I don't think they're that good. And he's always buying some weird fucking jelly or some weird fruity patootie thing in there. And I'm always like, what are lingelberries? Is that dingleberries from the Netherlands? I don't know. I don't want this stuff. Get it out of my pantry. So, oh my god, I had an IKEA rant. I'm so sorry. IKEA stresses me out.
Oh my god, I bet you have the right tool to put together the IKEA furniture, though.
Probably.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of special IKEA furniture swears.
A lot of IKEA what?
IKEA
sweaters?
Swears. I make up special
swears.
I make up special swears just for putting IKEA furniture together.
I'm sure you do.
I know I do, because I swear all the time. But
you should take that test on Facebook.
What test?
If you're sweary enough.
Oh, I'm certain that I'm swearing enough. I would make Jack Sparrow blush. I would make all the pirates blush. I make my dad blush, so So,
Oh my goodness. Well,
we should probably wrap her up, I think.
yeah, you think we covered all those tools? I think that was awesome.
I think we did, and we got to say tool all the time. And I got to say,
Yeah.
don't be such a tool. And that's my favorite thing to say, almost. My uncle and my dad and my brothers have all pointed out to me at some point in my early 20s, like, grown-ups have a set of tools in their house to use. Like, even if
Right.
you're not an artist, and even, you know, you need to own things like a hammer and a set of screwdrivers and,
Absolutely.
you know, and it's not, and I will take no excuses if you're a girl. Girls can I fix more shit in this house than my husband does. I'm the handy person here, so, you know, there's no excuse. You need to have a grown-up set of tools.
That's right. You do.
No more goddamn screwdriver or butter knife screwdrivers.
That's right.
Use them for spreading butter. Retire your butter knives, people. They're tired of screwing.
They want to be buttered.
They want to be buttered, not screwed. All right, we have been up way too long. So, if you want to get a hold of us and tell us that we're crazy, or tell us that we're awesome, or send us love letters, you can email us at 2artsygals@gmail.com. We will also take your questions and comments and episode suggestions. So please send those to us. And you can also reach us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, just 2 Artsy Gals. Search for that. You can send us messages there. And if you want to see the pictures of my tools and Sharon's tools that we're talking about today, you can go over to our blog, which is 2artsygals.wordpress.com. And we always have corresponding pictures and episodes notes every week. So you can go over there and check out my crazy tool set and Sharon's crazy tool set. And we are now on iTunes. So spread the word. You can search for us on iTunes and subscribe to this podcast there. And also, it would be super awesome and really helpful if you could give us an awesome review over there, because the more good reviews we get, the higher up in search results we are, so more people can find us. So go on over to iTunes and tell us how awesome we are, because that would be super cool. So anyway, thank you, Sharon. It was fun as always. And we'll talk to you all next week. Bye.
See you next week.